Okay, today we're gonna be looking at the 11th book, which is represented by the letter Kaf, which is the 11th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the two of the three books. You have the 11th book, 1 Kings, and then the 33rd book, the prophet Micah. The third book is 2 Timothy, which is the 55th book of the Bible. But we're going to be looking at 1 Kings and Micah and see how they are working together as a hand and glove. So the address of this page is Gilgal's Biblewheel.blogspot.ca /2014/07/ spoke -11 Micah and First Kings.html. The first thing is I had made a note to myself that a passage from Hosea 11:8. Hosea is the Hosea chapter 11, meaning it's the 11th spoke of the inner wheel of Hosea. So chapter 11 verse 8, how shall I give thee up, Ephraim? How shall I deliver thee, Israel? How shall I make thee as Admah? How shall I set thee as Zeboim? Mine heart is turned within me, my repentings are kindled together. The term give thee up is also mentioned in the 11th book, 1 Kings, and the 33rd book, Micah, and that's where we'll go. So I had written the reason God gave up northern Israel was because Jeroboam set up idols to prevent this people to go to the temple of God, which was in the southern Judah. For this reason, since none of the kings after Jeroboam destroyed those idols, God gave them up to the Assyrians. So you have Micah 5 verse 3. It says, therefore he will give them up until the time that she which travaileth has brought forth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel. And we have 1 Kings 14 verse 16, and he 1 Kings 14 verse 16, and he shall give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam, who did sin and who made Israel to sin. Jeroboam was the first king of northern Israel. When Rehoboam, Solomon's son, said that he was going to be tougher to northern Israel, the northern tribes of Israel, by taxing them. The northern tribes got their independence, and they made Jeroboam the first as king. But Jeroboam didn't have the confidence in God. It was in reality God who put him king by the mouth of the prophets. But he thought that Israel will go back to Judah one day because Jerusalem is found in Judea, and rebel against him. So he built places of idolatry, saying that these are the gods who took you out of Egypt, and that became a stumbling block to Israel. In this study, Micah is related to 1 Kings. Micah is the 11th prophetic book from Isaiah, and 1 Kings is the 11th prophetic book from Genesis. They are both found on the 11th book of the Biblewheel. Micah's words relate to names and events in 1 Kings. Jesus' messianic kingdom will be like the days of Solomon, where the surrounding nations were at peace. So the last words of 1 Kings were spoken by the prophet. The last words of a prophet were spoken in 1 Kings 22, and it was the prophet Micah, which is right here in verse 28. And Micah said, and the first words spoken in Micah 11 is the following. So in verse 19 in 1 Kings 22, you have the last words of the prophet Micah. So let me read them to you. Verse 19, and he said, hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. And thus saith the king, put this fellow in prison, and feed him with the bread of affliction and with water of affliction until I come in peace. This is what Ahab was saying because he wasn't pleased with the words of Micah. But the last words of the prophet Micah were, verse 28, and Micah said, if thou return at all in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me. If thou return at all in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me. And he said, hearken, O people, every one of you. And the words of the prophet Micah begin with chapter 1, verse 1. The word of the Lord that came to Micah the Morashite in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Of course, in chronological history, the prophet Micah came very much afterward the prophet Micah. The prophet Micah was living at the time of Ahab, whereas the prophet Micah was living at the time of Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, which is at the end of 2 Kings. 2 Kings around chapter 17, 18, 19. Whereas the prophet Micah was 1 Kings, the ending of 1 Kings, chapter 22. So the first words of the prophet Micah, verse 2, hear all ye people, hearken, O earth, and all that therein is, and let the Lord God be witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. So you see, the prophet Micah's last words were to hearken, O people, and the first words of the prophet Micah were, hear, all ye people. So you see how the prophet Micah ended the chapter with his words, and the prophet Micah actually picked up from where it was ended in 1 Kings chapter 22. So it's like a continuation. Even though they are historically distant, the subject is related to each other. So then we go on to the next. The word of the Lord that came to Micah the Morashite in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Hear, are you, all you people, hearken, O earth, and all that therein is, and let the Lord God be witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. And this is 1 Kings 22, verse 5. And Jehoshaphat said unto the king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, by the way, was the king of Judah, the southern Israel, and Ahab was the king of the northern Israel. Inquire, I pray thee, at the word of the Lord today. He was with Ahab to fight against the Syrians. He joined Ahab to battle against the Syrians, but the word of the prophet Micah was not to go to fight against Syria. And Jehoshaphat was joined with Ahab, but at the same time he was seeking the word of the Lord, God's guidance in the battle. And here's another occurrence of the word of the Lord. And here's another occurrence of, quote unquote, the word of the Lord. Verse 19 in 1 Kings 22. And he said, Hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him, on his right hand and on his left. And if you wish to know the rest of the story, here's the verses 20 and 21. And the Lord said, Who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said on this manner, and another said on that manner. And there came forth a spirit and stood before the Lord and said, I will persuade him. And verse 22 says, And the Lord said unto him, Wherewith? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, Thou shalt persuade him and prevail also. Go forth and do so. This also reminds me of events that happen in the modern times, where we might ask for counsel from the wrong person, and the person actually gives us what we want to hear, but not what we need to hear. And I believe that they're speaking in this spirit. It's the lying spirit that God would send